All right, let's look a little more on composition of functions. On this example, we've got g of f of 8 and then f of g of 3. Now, we could do these by first working out the whole function g of f, and then plugging 8 into that. And same thing down here, working out what the function f of g of x is, and then plugging in 3. But on a problem like this, where you're just asked for a single number, you're better off plugging things in first. So I'm going to rewrite this as g of f of 8. And so what I can do here is just plug 8 into f. I'm going to do that over here on the side. F of 8 is square root of 3 times 8 plus 1. So that's the square root of 25, which is just 5. So that's g of 5. And g of 5 is going to be 2 times 5 minus 9. So that's 1. So we can do it quickly by doing that. Now let's do this one down here, f of g of 3. So first up, let's do g of, well, let's write it out like this, f of g of 3. All right, g of 3. If I plug in g of 3, I get 2 times 3 minus 9. That's negative 3. So now I just need to do f of negative 3. And I wind up with the square root of 3 times negative 3 plus 1. Well, that's the square root of negative 8. And we're not talking about, we're not going to talk about imaginary numbers for a while in this class. So really what happens here is this is, we're just going to call this undefined. So in other words, the number 3 is not in the domain of f of g of x. So that kind of brings up the next thing I want to talk about is, let's look at the domain of composite functions. Okay, so suppose we have these two functions here, and we wanted to look at f of g of x. I'm going to skip a little space here. I want to find the domain of f of g of x. All right. Now there are two things we have to look out for. First off, we have to exclude, notice g is our inside function. So first up, we have to exclude anything that is not in the domain of g. So exclude things, exclude numbers not in domain of g. So let's come back up here and look at it. The only thing that's not in the domain of g is the solution to 4x minus 1 is 0. So x can't be 1/4. And over here, the domain of f would be all reals except -1. So for this, we've got to do two things. We have to first exclude numbers that are not in the domain of g. And then we have to make sure that when we put this together, that we don't get anything that will make the denominator of f of g 0. If we just plow ahead and say, what's f of g? F of g of x is going to be 3 over parentheses plus 1. And let's see, what goes in those parentheses? 2 over 4x minus 1. I need to write this bigger. So all we were asked for was the domain. So we know we have to exclude 4, and we also have to exclude solutions to set this denominator equal to 0. So let's solve that. I'm going to move the 1 to the other side over here. So I get 2 over 4x minus 1 equals negative 1. I'm going to cross multiply this. So I'll get 2 equals minus 4x plus 1. And so I get negative 1/4. So I have to exclude the 1/4 and the negative 1/4. So the domain of f of g is all reals except plus or minus 1/4. So let's talk about this just a little bit more. There are two things we had to throw away. We had to throw away anything, this over here is the function f of g of x. We had to throw away anything that makes its denominator 0. But we also had to throw away anything that makes the anything that's not in the domain of g of x. So we had to throw away the 1/4 and the negative 1/4. Let's look at another example. On this problem here, we've got f and g, and we want to find the domain of g of f. All right. So if you look at this f, the domain of f is all reals. The domain of g is all reals except for what? We can't have x equal to 0 because that would give us a denominator of 0. All right, so let's come down here and look at this. G of f of x. Well, we can plug anything into f, so we don't have to worry about that. But when we look at g of f, let's see, g, we've got two parentheses here. Parentheses plus 4 over just parentheses. We'll plug that in with 6x, x squared plus 6x plus 8. So what we have to do now is throw out anything that makes this denominator 0. Throw out, or the more formal term would be exclude, but let's see, this thing will factor, I do believe, into 4 and 2. Make it x plus 4 and x plus 2. Yeah, those add up to 6 and they multiply out to 8. So this is going to be all reals except negative 2 and negative 4. All right.